Good afternoon. Thank you, everyone, for coming. My name is Jeffrey Tumlin, and I am San Francisco's Director of Transportation. And I'm so grateful to have the Secretary, the Speaker, and the Mayor here to celebrate our progress on the Central Subway. We are also joined by local community, and I'm so grateful to all of you in the local community who have put up with years of construction and disruption here in the heart of Chinatown. But we promise it is going to be worth it. As we stand here, I want to acknowledge the long history that has taken to get here, including remembering the Loma Prieta earthquake and the demolition of the Embarcadero Freeway. This project in many ways started both as a radical idea and a strong community partnership. In the recovery after the '89 earthquake and the 1990 and 1991 recession, San Francisco was facing tough times. And at that time, the city had a bold vision to demolish the Embarcadero Freeway and replace it with a surface boulevard. But that wasn't good enough because we needed to serve the heart of Chinatown. And so then Mayor Willie Brown and Rose Pak struck a brilliant compromise to agree to demolish the Embarcadero Freeway, but to build a subway into the heart of Chinatown, connecting Chinese-American San Francisco into the economic and cultural heart of Chinese San Francisco. But to do even more than that, to revitalize the southeastern part of San Francisco, including this valley and the Bayview, to connect African American and Filipino American and other populations to new emerging job centers in Mission Bay, and to all the jobs in Union Square, and again here to Chinatown. So with support from Speaker Pelosi and $1 billion of federal funding, we are almost there. We're also really grateful. We're also really grateful to Secretary Buttigieg for his leadership on the passage of the bipartisan infrastructure bill. This once-in-a-generation opportunity can provide cities like ours the resources that we need to make a transportation system that works for everyone, but particularly the people who have the fewest mobility choices. I also want to make my appreciation known for Mayor Breed, who's continued in her leadership to prioritize the people who really need mobility investments and access to opportunities that are being created right here in San Francisco. So I'd like to introduce our first speaker, Malcolm Young, who's the Executive Director of the Chinatown Community Development Center, whose work has helped shape almost every detail of this project that you see here today. Malcolm.
I'm going to go old school here and read off of my phone instead of paper. So that was supposed to be funny, but I guess it's not. First of all, let me just say how humbling it is to be here today. There are so many important federal representatives, but just as importantly, there's so many local friends and allies who have been part of this project from the very beginning. And I won't name you all by name, but thank you so much for being here and being a part of this. I know you feel the love coming out of this project. Let me extend a big Chinatown welcome to Secretary Pete Buttigieg. Mr. Secretary, I don't know if this is your first visit here, but I hope it's not your last. We want to extend an open invitation to you to come back and explore the underlying richness of this community. We'd love to take you into our single-room occupancy hotels and our beloved public housing so you can see for yourself what a deep investment affordability can do for families, adults, and seniors. And investment is certainly the theme for today. Central Subway is a once-in-a-generation investment in this community and in this city. Unlike so many so-called investments in low-income communities of color, Central Subway was not a top-down edict from city planning. It was a demand from the residents, stakeholders, and leaders of Chinatown. Led by the legendary civic leader Rose Pak, who Mr. Tumlin mentioned, and the Chinese Chamber of Commerce, after whom the station is named, actually, the Chinatown Transit Research and Improvement Project, or Chinatown TRIP, a transit justice project formed in the 70s by former Muni bus drivers, the Community Tenants Association, now the largest tenant association in San Francisco, not just in Chinatown, and of course our family associations led by the Chinese Consolidated Benevolent Association. The Central Subway was and is a demand for transit justice to fill in for the now torn down Embarcadero Freeway after Loma Prieta, as Jeffrey mentioned. This community effort caught the attention of Mayor Brown, who came to champion this cause as well. And while Mayor Brown may have been the first black mayor of San Francisco, some say he may have been the first Chinese mayor of San Francisco. Also, given how he's received when he comes to Chinatown, that's also supposed to be a joke. It's not going so well, is it? All right. Mayor Ed Lee, the actual first Chinese-American mayor of this city, also championed the subway right up to his untimely death, and I had the privilege of working with both of them on this project. The Central Subway is an economic lifeline necessary to reconnect the historic immigrant neighborhood of Chinatown with the growing immigrant populations of the southeast neighborhoods of the city. Visitation Valley, Little Hollywood, Bayview Hunters Point. The Central Subway is also a transit gateway for regional visitors and tourists to help maintain the economic vibrancy that until most recently the pandemic threatened to erase. I was reminded of this equity-driven roots of this project when our longtime community organizer Tan Chow dug up a June 13th, 2003, that's almost 20 years ago, article chronicling the process of gathering tens of thousands of signatures and delivering them to Speaker Pelosi and Senator Feinstein, and then traveling to D.C. as a community to meet with the Congressional Committee on Transit. I think Norman went on that trip, or Reverend Fong, sorry, Reverend. And even 20 years ago, Speaker Pelosi and Senator Feinstein, as they always do, championed Chinatown's cause, having been moved by the grassroots effort. So this project's been a long time coming and not a minute too soon. Like many other communities, Chinatown needs this lifeline. But beyond the tremendous economic benefits that Central Subway will have, I want to share one impact that few people outside of our community see. Several years back, when Tan and I were doing outreach to merchants on this very street, there was one merchant who pointed out something I'll never forget. He told us that Central Subway was more than just an economic benefit. Having a station in Chinatown, having the word Chinatown printed in a citywide transit map that everyone would see, signaled something bigger. It signaled a permanence for this community. And the permanence of Chinatown is not something we can ever take for granted. Chinatown survived numerous attempts at relocation or erasure, first after the Great Quake of '06, then during the redevelopment period that drove financial district expansion in the 70s, and most recently the threat posed by the pandemic. The Central Subway means, as the aforementioned merchant implied, that Chinatown has been, is, and will be forever a part of the fabric of San Francisco. Thank you. And with no further ado, I now have the honor of introducing the next speaker, someone who actually needs no introductions in these parts, certainly not in this community. Mayor Breed's been a supporter of Chinatown in the most important way, and I have the distinct honor of introducing our third Chinese-American mayor, Mayor London Breed.
I can truly attest to the fact that I definitely probably come in third, and that Mayor Willie Brown still comes in first every time he shows up to Chinatown. And so I'm grateful for his leadership, for Mayor Ed Lee, and the work that they did to get us here today. But today I'm going to take all the credit, now that I am mayor, for moving this project forward, which has been long awaited by this community and this city. But before I give my remarks, I just want to take an opportunity to just express my condolences. Many of you know that Queen Elizabeth II passed away today, and I wanted you all to know that on behalf of the City and County of San Francisco, we have set up a book for those who are interested in coming to City Hall to sign this book. We will then present it to our Consul General here, who represents Europe, and make sure that the community receives this book of condolences. And so thank you all so much. Many people have reached out to us to want to know exactly what San Francisco plans to do, and that's exactly what we plan to do. She was a marvelous lady, and she definitely will be missed. And again, thank you, Malcolm, and welcome everyone. I want to start by really thanking our leader, our Speaker, Nancy Pelosi, and Secretary Buttigieg for joining, or maybe mayor. I like to call him mayor still because he served as a mayor, but we also are very proud of his work as Transportation Secretary because it is definitely needed. Having a mayor's perspective is so important because he really understands what it takes to get projects like this done. And thank you for bringing us all here today. I want to recognize city staff, many who have worked tirelessly to plan and build this project, and thank the community for their patience during the many, many years of construction. We know transit is the backbone of this city, and our priority right now is on our recovery and reopening. That means bringing back the transit routes and connections our communities rely on to get to work, to get to school, to get around the city, or just to come out on a beautiful day and hang out in Chinatown. What we know is that when we invest in transportation, it benefits our city and it benefits people's lives. And in April, we opened up, finally, the Van Ness Bus Rapid Transit System, which has been a huge success. People are saving up to 35% of their time now that BRT is here. That's a big difference. And that difference is bringing more people to ride the bus. And we are going to see those benefits again when the Central Subway finally opens up later this fall. It will serve some of the densest neighborhoods in the city and help connect people from Chinatown to Union Square, all the way down to Oracle Park, to Chase Center, and to the Bayview Hunters Point. The Central Subway will greatly reduce travel times and ease congestion in some of the city's busiest areas, and it will connect to our regional transit systems, BART and Caltrain, and I know we have representatives from those entities here with us today, and thank you all for your partnership and your work. It's going to connect the entire Bay Area network. That's what this is about. So with Central Subway opening soon, we already are thinking of what's to come next. I was telling the speaker, I'm like, you do so much for San Francisco and we give you love. And then soon as we give you love, just like family, what have you done for me lately? What can you do for me next? Right? Well, Madam Speaker, we really appreciate you. And we ask you this, from the heart. We have the Central Subway coming soon, and we're already thinking about what's coming next. We have so much more to do, more planning, more maintenance, more building. We have 2 funding priorities. We want to bring our existing Muni rail system up to the state of good repair after decades of disinvestment. And second, we always want to have a subway under construction. I said my priority really was, as a native of San Francisco, to get this subway all the way to Fisherman's Wharf. But native San Franciscans know what I'm talking about. It will be amazing. But next on our list is the tunnel that will connect Caltrain and high-speed rail to our Salesforce Transit Center. That's for all you commuters in the Bay Area. That connection is so critical to the future of our city and our downtown. And yes, Secretary, we have applied for a federal grant to help fund that critical project. But welcome to San Francisco. When we invest in transit, we feel the difference. It's faster, it's more reliable, and it's a comfortable way to get us to where we need to go. It helps our economy, it helps our families, our seniors, and it helps our workers who rely on it. September is Transit Month, and I can't imagine a better place to celebrate that than with all of you. I continue to love seeing everyone ride, our kids riding free like we did when we were kids, even though we really were supposed to pay, but now we're made it legitimate. Tourists taking our cable cars and people commuting to work. This is what it means to experience San Francisco. And you know what? It feels so good. We wouldn't be here if it wasn't for the help of our Speaker, Nancy Pelosi, and funding from FTA's New Starts program. Thank you, Madam Speaker, for everything that you always done. I mean, I should just, print a thank you, something that she could just carry it. Thank you from San Francisco residents, because when it comes to transit, housing, you name it, she is always delivering time and time again for this community. And thank you to Secretary Buttigieg for your support and for being here in San Francisco. There are so many places across the country that you could travel, but you're here highlighting the great work we do. And under your leadership, the Biden administration has prioritized transit, especially rail, bus, rapid transit, and streetcars. You've prioritized connecting communities that have historically been cut out from economic opportunities, and we appreciate that. And you've also prioritized street safety. Recently, we received a federal grant to help make Howard Street in South of Market safer for pedestrians and bicyclists, thanks to these 2 extraordinary leaders right here. And as former mayor, you understand how critical urban connections are to making our cities more livable and more successful. That's exactly the kind of leadership we need, and we are thankful that you are joining us here in San Francisco. And if there are any other projects you think you might want to throw some funding at, just let us know. Don't worry, we have ready to go, shovel ready, whatever it takes. San Francisco is your place. But seriously, thank you for being here and all of your work and your leadership and your commitment to making public transit more equitable, more efficient, and more sustainable for our country. And ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, Mayor Secretary of Transportation, Pete Buttigieg.
Well, thank you so much, Mayor. I will always proudly answer to the title of Mayor, but I also acknowledge that it's only gotten more demanding since I wore that title, and you've got so much to be proud of. So thank you for the warm welcome, and congratulations on everything that's gone on here. I want to congratulate Director Jeff Tumlin and thank him for the tour, and you and your team, Jeff, have so much to be proud of as well, and I know we're going to keep you busy with all the work ahead. So to the Director, to SFMTA, to the union workers who have been working for a decade, including during some of the worst years of the pandemic, to bring this to life. And to those who have spoken to what this means to a community. In this place you can feel the distinctiveness, not only the bustle and the food and the richness and the culture, but the sense of belonging that is so very important, and that we're so glad this project will support. And of course, it is my honor to be at the side of Speaker Pelosi, someone who has brought so many transformative infrastructure projects like the Central Subway to the Bay Area, but also has brought so many good investments to the entire country. I spent the last few weeks on the road. We've been to Tampa, Tulsa, Northern Nevada, Minneapolis, Sandusky, Ohio, Northern New Hampshire, Southern California. Today we were in the Inland Empire. What every single one of the projects that we saw there had in common is that it wouldn't have happened without the bipartisan infrastructure law, and the bipartisan infrastructure law wouldn't have happened without the leadership of Speaker Pelosi, and we're so thankful for that. And the President recently signed the Inflation Reduction Act, something that's going to make such a difference to so many people here and across California. Another extraordinary legislative achievement, making prescription drugs more affordable for seniors, helping families save on their utility bills. And while, unfortunately, it didn't get any Republican votes in Congress, I do want to note that that bill has widespread bipartisan support among the American people, and that's one more reason it's a good thing that it got done. Meanwhile, we're hard at work implementing the bipartisan infrastructure law, funding so many great projects. And the thing that I see and feel everywhere we go, and certainly felt it here during our visit to the Central Subway, is the passion that people bring. Not maybe because they're transportation wonks like me, but because they're passionate about their own neighborhoods and communities and families and workplaces and lives, and they know how all of that will benefit from the investments that are being made here. Now, when it comes to the Central Subway, there are so many to acknowledge. The late activist and Chinatown champion, Rose Pak, who over a decades-long career helped to save the Chinese hospital, fought to stabilize Chinatown rents, and played such a key role in the construction of the Central Subway. Someone who said that planning requires setting sites at least 100 years from now. And that kind of long-term thinking is what we believe we need to bring to the investments that we're making today. And it was a long time that this Central Subway has been in the works. The department was proud to support it a decade ago under President Obama with nearly $1 billion in funds, and is going to pay dividends for generations to come, perhaps even that 100 years into the future. It's going to better connect the most densely populated neighborhood in San Francisco to the social and economic life of the city. It'll bring tourists and residents alike to Chinatown for food and shopping, make it easier for people who live here to reach jobs, schools, and resources in the rest of the city. And of course, when most people can get around with public transit, that makes everyone better off. It means faster commutes, cleaner air. Even for the people who don't use transit, there's less congestion, which means that it truly is a win-win-win. And it's exactly the kind of project we're going to see more of, thanks to this bipartisan infrastructure that contains the largest federal investment in public transit in the history of the United States of America. And we're going to be hard at work delivering on that. In fact, the same program that is funding this subway has more than doubled under that infrastructure package, along with the increases to so many other programs, like the one that allowed us to bring that good news that I was thinking of as we drove up through Soma, Mayor, in order to get to our first stop, upgrading Howard Street to make it safer, with bike lanes, pedestrian lighting, green infrastructure, and more, with $23 million in raised funds. I want to end with a broader thought about the historic work we're undertaking this year and what it means for the people of this country. I'm, of course, proud of all of the transportation pieces of the initiatives and the vision that is going on right now under this administration, but it is just part of a broader vision to make the entire country better off, to make it easier to afford to get through life, to protect our veterans, to reshore manufacturing jobs to America, and to make sure that families can thrive in a future that has been all too uncertain as we've looked at the years that have led us to this moment. And with that, I have the pleasure of turning it over to somebody who represents such an important part of what this is all about, the job creation that will come with this infrastructure spending. Rudy Gonzalez, who will introduce the speaker, represents the San Francisco building and construction trades, who we are both very eager to keep at work with the funding that's going on, and very much turning to help prepare the workforce that we're all going to need and count on, and importantly, to ensure that that workforce is inviting, as I know you've been working on, to women and workers of color who haven't had it as a family inheritance, but will be able to pass generational wealth on to the next generation of their families, thanks to these good-paying jobs. So thank you again for the chance to join you, and Rudy, over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. In organized labor, we get excited when we see, and you can see it in our eyes, when we see our movement leaders and we see our champions. And I kind of had a transit nerd moment when I looked over in the crowd and I saw Adam from TJPA and I saw Tilly from the SFCTA, and they were looking at Secretary Pete because this is their guy. And it's exciting. It is Transit Week. We can be excited about that, everybody. People ask me about the elusive green job that exists. Where's it coming from? What's the transition going to look like for workers? What might it be? And I say look no further than public infrastructure and transit. Those are the green jobs of today. They're the green jobs of tomorrow. And I'd be remiss if I didn't talk a little bit about the history. And being in organized labor, we owe it to everyone in our community to be blunt and to be honest. Like my partner in crime, Kim Tavallone, the head of our San Francisco AFL-CIO, would remind me, tell it like it is, right, Kim? Well, like it is has to do with racism and inequality. And it has to do with connecting the southeast of this city, who have been left out of the economy, left out of our unions historically. And it has to do with the Chinese immigrant experience and the AAPI community and their struggle, not just for relevance, but for survival and legitimacy in this very city. Now, we champion liberal and San Francisco values, but we have to acknowledge the hard road that it took to get to this place. And even the interference at times from the political class of seeing a project like this come to completion. Well, I hope that anybody who stood on the sidelines and talked about a boondoggle will have to smile with excitement the same way travelers did when they first crossed that boondoggle known as the Golden Gate Bridge that was erected in 4 years and 4.5 months of construction, or that people talked about of the BART tunnels that was built in a little more than 4.5 years, but was built nonetheless. And it took bold leadership at that time, years and years ago, bold leadership, not in the Assembly or in the City Attorney's office as he sits now, but when now City Attorney David Chu championed the entitlements for this very project many, many years ago in his role on the Board of Supervisors. Having a vision, being willing to articulate a plan, and then going for it. Taking risk that is political, but on behalf of community. I can tell you that in the audience is one of my personal heroes, Megan Pryor. And she's not anybody. She's a member of the International Union of Operating Engineers. And she's a black woman and a leader in the operating engineers and a working mom. And she graduated from the City Build Academy, found her way into apprenticeship, and she is a journeyman in the skilled trades. I'm honored because it is lives like hers that are changed and communities like hers that are not only connected through this green infrastructure, but that are lifted up into the working class and given a future. And then they can proudly hand that down to others. So whether we're honoring our veterans who put in time after discharge from the military, or we're giving new life and second chances to folks who have been justice involved and previously incarcerated. The Building and Construction Trades Council stands ready to put everybody to work. And in the most pro-union administration we've seen in our lifetimes, we know that that's possible. We know that the country, in a bipartisan way, supports these investments in our communities, not just in San Francisco, but across the country. And we know that with bold leadership and vision today, we can not only see the completion of a project like this, but we can see the breaking ground of further projects like DTX2 at the Transbay Terminal and other elements of green infrastructure to keep our people working. So on the note of keeping our people working, we couldn't be more excited than to be in the presence of another one of my heroes, Madam Speaker Nancy Pelosi. You can clap at that one. The Speaker has shown not just bold and progressive values, but she's shown what it means to demonstrate effective leadership, courage under fire. And quite literally, when our democracy has been threatened, Nancy Pelosi has answered the call on behalf of San Franciscans, on behalf of union workers and our families, and on behalf of all Americans and people who seek the promise of the American dream. I couldn't be more honored to stand with one of our champions, battle-tested, tried and true. I'm so honored to be with you, and I have to point out she's wearing her Public Service Awardee pin that was handmade for her from the Building and Construction Trades Council on the celebration of our 125th year of lifting up skilled and trained workers. But please join me in welcoming our hometown hero, our champion for the working class, Madam Speaker Nancy Pelosi. Thanks, Nancy.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Rudy, for your very generous remarks, which I accept on behalf of all of the House Democrats who courageously have voted for so many of these initiatives. It's an honor to be here in Chinatown. I joined the mayor in wishing condolences on the passing of Queen Elizabeth II. We're flying the flags at half staff at the Capitol, and we'll do some more bereavement in her honor. But here we are today to look to the future and to celebrate. As Jeff pointed out, the path that took us here, Malcolm talked about the community involvement of it all, the mayor and how leadership in our city weighed in time and time again to make this happen. The distinguished Secretary of Transportation talking about how it fits in with other pieces of legislation that this president has put forth, most recently the Inflation Reduction Act, which has many with the priority of protecting the environment, many public transportation initiatives as well. And then I just want to then say that Rudy has been a champion. If it isn't about good-paying Davis-Bacon jobs, we are not interested in advancing it. We say to our colleagues in the Congress, if you want to talk to us about advancing legislation, we are not going backward, we're going forward. And that means that we are going to have good-paying union jobs. And not only that, let me just say a few things. First, let me say how happy I am to be in Chinatown. And I see Florence Fang is here. When I ran for Congress 35 years ago, the very first event that was held for me was in Chinatown with Florence Fang. Thank you, Florence, for your leadership in the community. And to see David Chu here, who represents our community so well in the state legislature, before that in the state, in the Board of Supervisors, as was mentioned. Thank you for your leadership. I want to mention another person, because we talked about community, as Malcolm did so beautifully. The fact is that it's not only Chinatown and all other communities that are served by this. It was the community that really sacrificed so much, and that was Union Square. And Karen Flood is here, who helped orchestrate peace there in terms of getting us through when everything was shut down, Mr. Secretary. But as you know, many businesses suffered. But here we are, opened up. Thank you, Karen Flood, for your leadership. This president has been about protecting the environment. These transportation issues do that. He's about justice in our economy and in our infrastructure. $60 billion in the infrastructure bill for justice, for fairness, for equity. As the Secretary as frequently says, transportation to bring us together, not to separate us. And that is what this president is about. It's about justice. And that can only happen if we are listening to the communities and opening opportunities for work to previously underrepresented people, whether it's women, people of color, whatever it is, with apprenticeship programs, which are in that bill, but also in our CHIPS and Science bill, which weds with this in a very important justice way, which are in our Inflation Reduction Act, which interacts with this in a very important way. So we have to be grateful to the President for his leadership, his value system that has impacted so many of the initiatives in these laws. And then I want to say about community. I've been here a long time, as the mayor indicated. We've been through a lot of projects, starting with Art Agnos, and Art Agnos was really instrumental in the transition from the earthquake to where we are today, as well as Willie and Gavin Newsom and Mayor Lee, and now our very dazzling Mayor London Breed. Thank you, Mayor Breed, for your tremendous, tremendous leadership, for putting it all in perspective for people, to always showing what comes next. But when we're talking about this in the Congress, I'll just tell you this, come in closer. When we allocate resources, we want to see it happen. There's competition for all of it. We want to see dirt fly. We want to see it happen. And so when the community comes together in advance or in the course of all of this, we know that dirt will fly because people have come to agreement. We won't be in court the whole time. We'll be underground or opening up. Beautiful, beautiful. You get my point, Malcolm?
Absolutely.
We've been there, right, Mayor? And some of you and all of this. So in any case, this is cause for celebration. Yes. I was telling them when we were doing the groundbreaking a number of years ago, we're sitting there. I think by then it was Willie there on the stage, and all of a sudden, we started jumping up and down with joy. Of course, we were excited about the project, but we found out that the Giants had made it to the World Series, that they had won the pennant. So we all have our, shall we say, sense of community, and this project will connect us to the Warriors, right, ma'am?
Yes.
Yeah. If you have a ticket to the game, you get a free ride on this. The mayor promises that. On behalf of the Golden State Warriors. Yes. But in any event, to all of you, to so many here, Kim, thank you for your leadership as well. But I want to get back to the person who introduced me, Rudy Gonzalez. When you're talking to Rudy and the other leaders of the building trades, their big interest are their workers. Are they going to have jobs? Are they going to have good paying jobs? Are we going to be able to lift people up in a way that has justice, fairness, and opportunity? And not just jobs, jobs that can lead to ownership, equity of all that is going on. So again, for saving the planet, okay, thank you, Jeff, for saving the planet, for safety in our community, in this system, for just moving kids, as the mayor said, to school, parents to work, families to community involvement, shopping, and the rest. It's so perfect that we have this celebration here in Chinatown. Thank you all for making it possible. And again, I said to the Secretary, our hopes are riding on you. Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Thank you, Tim.
All right.
Oh, and then I'm supposed to open it to questions. Any questions? Did we anticipate any questions that you may have? Well, if I may, I'll be happy to answer that. I'm sure the mayor as well. But to stay on topic for a moment, anything that relates to what we're doing here for the moment? Okay. Well, I was telling some earlier today that when I was Speaker and Her Majesty came to Washington, it was when President Bush was president. She had been there before in the 90s, but she came in 2007. And they had a garden party for her outside of the residence, the residence of the ambassador. And when she came to me, I said to her, you you don't even know if you were supposed to initiate a conversation with Her Majesty, but I did anyway, as speaker. Your Majesty, my father was at your coronation. Mr. Mayor, Mr. Secretary, Madam Mayor, he was there as part of the U.S. Conference of Mayors. He was mayor of Baltimore, and they were guests at the coronation. So I said, my father, and she was very interested in that. So this is what I was told. I'm just telling you what I was told. After that lovely session with her, later I saw the ambassador, and he said, Madam Speaker, when Her Majesty came in from seeing everyone at the garden party, she only said one thing. The Speaker's father was at my coronation. I haven't shared that story publicly, but since we have two mayors here and the Queen leaving us today, it was lovely. It was lovely. We have been flying flags at half staff at the Capitol. The moment we heard, we'll have a bereavement resolution, moment of silence, all that at the Capitol. And thank you, Mayor, for having the book of condolences for San Franciscans to express their concern. Not that we always agreed on everything with UK and that, but nonetheless, a great leader for many generations. Any questions on what we're doing here today? Well, thank you for asking that, because I mentioned and I'm going to yield to the Secretary on this as well. I mentioned the CHIPS and Science Act. We've been negotiating this bill for a long time. There were people who said, just do the CHIPS, let's just get it over with the CHIPS. And we said, that's fine for now. But for the future, we need the science piece. The science piece is about education. It's about research. It's about involving many people in the community had previously not been able to participate, people of color, women, etc. So that part of that bill directly relates to what we are talking about here today, as well as what we did in the infrastructure bill and rest. This project precedes all of that legislation, but it still needs the people to make it happen. And our building trades, women in drywall, women of steel, women at the IBEW. We've seen so many unions now, and we have one here. She waved to us earlier. Thank you again. At the school, which I have visited, and it's remarkable how it trains young people. So your question is very perfect, because we have to have the direct relationship with how we train the current and next generation on how to bring their ideas, the sense of their communities, into the future. Mr. Secretary, did you want to speak to that?
Sure. Thank you, Speaker. Just very briefly, we're thinking a lot about generational wealth. And when I say generational wealth, I don't mean the wealthy. I mean the family household wealth that is built through the middle class jobs that good paying construction work, union jobs can create. And we know that we're going to create so many of those directly through this infrastructure work, extending them also to workers, including women and workers of color who historically did not always have the opportunity to get those jobs. And even for those who don't work anywhere near the infrastructure field directly, their opportunities will expand to access school, to access jobs, to access the places they need to be, thanks to being better linked up to opportunity as this subway will provide. I also don't want to be remiss in adding to the other leaders who've spoken an expression of my sympathy for the British people on the passing of Queen Elizabeth and her extraordinary reign.
Well, the fact is that what is happening here today should give people great hope that it can happen when there is cooperation, when there is community involvement, where is recognition about how needed this is. And that is really what the President's initiatives have been all about. So therefore, I'm going to yield to the Secretary. because we cannot. When we were passing the infrastructure bill, people said, "Oh, nobody's going to see it. It's going to take forever. It's going to be like the other projects. They build freeways right through our neighborhood." So it's not going to be like that. We're celebrating what we're doing here today. But in celebrating that, we are recognizing that things will be done differently, and because of the leadership of the president insisting on justice and fairness and safety and the rest, it will be done again with community involvement, which frequently can speed up the process. Right, Mr. Secretary?
Indeed, we feel the expectation and the pressure to deliver everything we're funding on time, on budget, and on task. And that's not an easy thing. But one of my favorite things about transportation projects is that good ones make skeptics into believers. Seeing is believing, and when you get that benefit, it is something that everybody is glad for. But the tendency of large projects to take longer and cost more than expected is one that goes back through human history to the ancient Romans, and it's one that we are up against and fiercely working to combat, because we know we've got to get every ounce of value out of this $1.2 trillion, about half of it for transportation, that the Speaker and the Congress and the President have entrusted us with delivering.
Madam Mayor, did you want to
I would like to add something to that, because thank you both to our Speaker and our Secretary for putting it into perspective. I mean, I haven't heard one complaint about the BRT on Van Ness since it opened. And it was definitely not on time and not on budget. And I understand the challenges that exist. You got to remember, San Francisco is a very dense city. There are complications underground, pipes and other infrastructure that hasn't been looked at or opened for decades. And so I'd rather be delayed in the project and do it right and make sure it's safe and make sure it's secure than to rush through to try and meet a deadline. These are some of the things that we have to deal with as a result of making San Francisco a better place for the future, making San Francisco a more transportation-friendly network for the entire region. We can't just be concerned with what happens with us today. We have to be concerned about what happens with us tomorrow and the next generation as we try and deal with the challenges of making this transportation system work. I often say to people, like, I wish people who came before me would have thought about putting everything underground so that our entire transportation network functioned that way. But that didn't happen. So we're trying to make up for some things that did not happen. And this is just going to be, sadly, the price you pay. But what we appreciate is that we have the resources and the support from our federal leaders like never before. And that means more opportunity to make things a reality. Many of us never thought the possibility of even going to Fisherman's Wharf underground would even be seen in our lifetime. And the reality is it could be. So I'm looking at being optimistic and hopeful about the future, and we're going to be just inconvenienced a little bit in the process.
I just may say earlier, and I don't know if she's still here, we were joined by the Lieutenant Governor of California, Eleni Kounalakis, that she had to go, but she was with us earlier. So we have our shared values at the state level. Thank you, David, for being here at the federal, state, and local level. Yes?
Last question. Yeah. Local transit agencies, including Muni, are becoming increasingly reliant on federal funds due to COVID and other factors. So what would you, Secretary Pete, or anyone else say about the increased role that the federal government should play in helping fund local agencies?
Well, what I'd say is that transit is important not only for those who ride it, but it's also in the national interest. The more people choose transit, the more people have excellent access to transit, the stronger our overall economy. And it is no less a part of our fight against climate change than EVs or anything else we're doing to make sure that we prevent the worst climate outcomes. So in addition to wanting to support local communities, in addition to being so proud and so thankful for the action that the Speaker and Congress and President and others took just to keep transit going during the worst days of COVID, we also know that we need to invest in a future that may look different. We don't have a crystal ball to say exactly how commuting patterns will look 5 or 10 years from now.